After a busy NBA trade deadline in which the Sixers agreed to 4 trades, freeing up 3 roster spaces, the Sixers have officially filled one of them by signing Kyle Lowry to a buyout contract. He's agreed to a $2.8 million deal with the Sixers after the buyout with the Hornets. In this video, I want to break down what he specifically brings to the team, how much this moves the meter from a playoff perspective, and everything else as it pertains to Kyle Lowry. Now, before I dive fully into it, I want to make sure you guys are hitting subscribe on the channel. Got to keep the Sixers Digest family growing. Appreciate all you guys for tuning into each and every one of these. I'm very thankful for what we got going on, but a ton of big plans in the future, and the Sixers team has given us plenty to talk about. So as we get into Kyle Lowry, I first want to shout out, I do recommend you guys check out the announcement that he made over Twitter is where I saw it there. Very cool little coming home video and some of his high school highlights. And it's very clearly something that is cool to Kyle Lowry. This is something that he wanted to play in Philadelphia. We also have from Woj him specifically saying this, that on NBA Today, Woj saying Kyle Lowry has hoped his whole career that he would have a chance to go back to Philly where he was a star at Cardinal Daci High School and at Villanova. The Sixers traded Patrick Beverley for a second-round pick, I think with the expectation and the hope that they'd get Kyle Lowry to come back and an organization that thinks they can still get something out of Lowry in limited minutes. So I was pretty frustrated on here following the Patrick Beverley and Jaden Springer deals. Still don't love the decision-making process that goes into it, more specifically with Jaden Springer, that is a guy that you're just giving up on for only a second-round pick. To me, is not a smart organizational move in the long term. But when you do look at the Patrick Beverley move specifically, you can kind of zoom out and see the full picture at this point, that essentially Daryl Morey traded Patrick Beverley for a second-round pick, campaign, and Kyle Lowry. That was the decision-making process that went in there. And when you look at that from a zoomed-out move, now that everything is completed, you can live with that and be pretty happy about that. That is a good use of value. That is something that you do have to tip the cap to Daryl Morey for. But I do want to talk more about Kyle Lowry specifically here. Now, there was another quote coming out from Lou Will saying, I spoke with Kyle yesterday about it. He was really excited to be returning home. He had an opportunity to go to a couple different teams. He just felt like this was the best fit for him. So that is all great. And we have a little more from John Clark here saying that if you play hard here, they love you forever. Kyle Lowry is a huge Eagles fan. He has always wanted to play in his hometown of Philly, grew up at 20th and Lehigh and played at Villanova. He will be a Sixer. So I do love that the vibes are here, that Kyle Lowry is excited to be back, excited to be playing in Philadelphia and wear a Sixers uniform. But the bottom line is this only matters depending on what he has left in the tank. Now, with Kyle Lowry specifically, I want to begin by kind of comparing him to Patrick Beverley because I think it's pretty hand in glove that those are going to be the minutes that he essentially takes. Kyle Lowry is by far past the best areas of his career. There's no doubt about that. But this is still the Kyle Lowry that was a high-level contributor on a Miami Heat team that went to the NBA Finals last year. Now, to look at his stats as a whole, this coming from the regular season here, you can see he has been around forever, 37 years old at this point, been to many All-Star games, a 6th Man of the Year, most improved, a ton of statistics that through his career averaging 14.4 points per game, 6.2 assists, 4.3 rebounds. The three-point shooting is something that I want to dig in on and talk about here. 5.2 three-point attempts per game. Even last year with the Miami Heat, playing 28 minutes a game, still getting up 4.4 three-point attempts and connecting on a 38.5% rate last year, a 36.8% rate through his career. He is a guy who's a more willing and more capable three-point shooter than Patrick Beverley, and that is kind of all that matters when you look at the surrounding Joel Embiid with shooters. That is very clearly the focus. It makes a ton of sense, and that is still the asterisk that we have to keep when talking about the Sixers team as a whole, is there's no timetable yet for Joel Embiid's return. That we know he's going to be reevaluated in 4 weeks post-surgery, that it's looking like a 6 to 8 week injury recovery, but this is still something that the Sixers have been far more secretive about and not putting things on the table in the way that I would appreciate and I think would be a better look for everybody. But the bottom line is none of this matters if Joel Embiid does not come back and look like himself. Now, if that is the case, and we have to operate under that assumption, I think that's the only way that the Sixers can maneuver from here, can look for, that you have to just continue believing that Joel Embiid will step back on the floor and look like himself. If that is the case, it is more important to have shooters on the team like Kyle Lowry. And Kyle Lowry still brings a lot of the good Patrick Beverley traits, that he is going to be a guy that scraps it up on the defensive end. He's going to be a guy that is, gets in people's faces, pumps up the energy, all those things that Pat Bev did bring to this team, and I really appreciated. Kyle Lowry is going to do a lot of that, and he's just a straight-up better basketball player as a whole. Now, my concern and my frustration with this is I'm confident in what Pat Bev still has left in his legs. I'm not as confident in Kyle Lowry. That is the biggest fear of mine, is that he is absolutely cooked. I think the best case scenario is he's got a little something. This, I think, is probably pretty likely to be his final year in the NBA. Maybe one more if he really wants to keep going, but this is a guy well past his prime. Now, I did want to dig in on the playoff statistics here. We know that he won a ring with the Toronto Raptors back in the 2018-2019 season with Nick Nurse as his head coach, by the way, a 15-point per game score during that entire playoff run. Last year with the Miami Heat, playing in 23 games, played 26 minutes per game, scored 9.2 points, 4.4 assists, 3.5 rebounds, shot 37.5% from three. Very solid performance. That he wasn't a guy that I would say was a driving force in this Heat run, that I think I would point much closer to guys like Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, even Caleb Martin. I thought shined far more than Kyle Lowry, but he was still a guy that delivered, that he was still a guy that served his purpose, played his role, and helped that team to a pretty high level extent. That is all the Sixers are asking for Kyle Lowry at this point in his career. We're not asking him to be the third star next to Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. We're asking him to be a serviceable backup point guard. Now, from a basketball perspective, I like the way that he does fit into this offense. That I do think it's very important that the Sixers team found more ball handling and more guys that can kind of run the team. That is Cam Payne, that is Kyle Lowry, and we'll see what these other two roster spots end up being. I've heard a lot about Danny Green being a guy that's coming back. He's not a guy who quite helps in that playmaking category, but another shooter when we're speaking about the fit around Joel Embiid. That everyone on this roster, it's very clear they fit better around Joel. That this is a team constructed to maximize your star, and that is the way that you should build a roster. But for the short term, they still have to find a way to win games, and Kyle Lowry can help in that category as well. And when I speak to that specifically, I'm more speaking about the concept of moving Tyrese Maxey off ball. And when I say that, I think a lot of people take that as a criticism to Tyrese Maxey, and that is not at all what I mean by that. That I think there's just a little too much on Tyrese Maxey's plate right now. That his shoulders are heavy with the weight that he's carrying of this Sixers franchise. This is a 23-year-old kid who is delivered to every single question, every single expectation that has been asked of him. But there's a lot. You're asking him to be the primary guy that runs the offense, is the number one playmaker, and leading the team in scoring. That's a ton to put on a guy. When you add a piece like Kyle Lowry, who can step in, play next to Tyrese Maxey, who knows what he's got left from the defensive side of things. That there was a point in time where Kyle Lowry was an excellent defender. I'm sure that he's still going to be a guy getting in there, taking charges, being annoying at the worst. But from the offensive end, he can be a guy that gives Tyrese Maxey the freedom to run off screens, to go off pin downs, have opportunities to catch and shoot in a way that he just doesn't right now, or hasn't over the past couple weeks, really this whole season if we're looking at it, since the James Harden trade obviously occurred at the start of the year. Maxey was asked to be the primary point guard on this team and still the number 2 scoring option next to Joel Embiid. That's a tough balancing act to walk, and while he's done an overall excellent job of it, I think it would be beneficial for him to be able to move off ball, get these catch and shoot opportunities, and at least just have maybe even a little rest starting the game. That we're not asking for every single possession to be that guy, that maybe he can maximize this team as a floor spacer, be a guy that can just take catch and shoot opportunities. We're talking about the same Tyrese Maxey, by the way, who was top 5 in the NBA in three-point percentage the past 2 seasons. The efficiency has dipped a little bit, still sitting over 37%, which I'm absolutely happy with. That's not something that I'm going to be complaining about, but he's not in the 40s in the way he was the past 2 years. I think a lot of that is much more to do with the shot selection and shot volume that he is being forced to put out. That you're just not going to hit it quite at the same clip when you're sprinting around, having to do step backs and create your own look, versus if you're just taking these catch and shoot, great look opportunities, which was kind of the case the past 2 years. That by far a career high in three-point volume for Tyrese. And as I mentioned, I'm still not complaining about the efficiency. That if you're in the upper 30s for me, that is completely fine, especially with everything else that he is asked to do and the way that he puts it on the floor, finishes around the rim. Not complaining about that specifically. But I do think by adding Kyle Lowry, this is another way to maximize Tyrese Maxey. And by the way, when we speak about the long-term view of Tyrese Maxey, he's had a pretty good path to walk as far as veterans and guys that he's learned from. You can very clearly see the influence of James Harden on his game, that step back specifically, some of the other intricacies of the way that he play makes and things that you can see the way he learned from James Harden with that. Then you bring in a guy like Pat Bev, who, like him or hate him, there is a veteran savvy that Pat Bev has that is important to teams that I wanted as a part of this Sixers playoff run. And those are things that Tyrese seems to have picked up on to some extent. That we saw him showing love on Instagram, sending a goodbye to Pat Bev, that they did seem like they were pretty close from a relationship standpoint. That is a great veteran to continue to learn from Tyrese. And then you bring in a guy like Kyle Lowry, who also carries a lot of the same veteran traits, who's a guy that I think if you look at the long-term view of Tyrese Maxey, I think he can be better than Kyle Lowry was to an extent. That I think from an overall ceiling standpoint, Tyrese is absolutely higher. But don't sleep on how good Kyle Lowry truly was. That I think that's a pretty good model as a guy that you can look at to make some adjustments to your game or learn from or add some things that he can do. So from a long-term standpoint, I love Kyle Lowry being a guy that can be a leadership model to Tyrese, a guy that can help take him under his wing a little bit, and that does replace the Pat Bev category there. So I love that Kyle Lowry's happy to be back. I'm excited for what he can bring to Tyrese, both in the short-term standpoint of freeing him up off ball in some offensive sets, in the long-term standpoint from allowing him to learn from him. And the bottom line is, this is a proven champion under Nick Nurse. That no, I'm not saying they were one Kyle Lowry away from being the title favorites. That there's still a lot that has to go on with the Sixers team. There's still 2 open roster spots that need to be filled before the playoff run and whenever that may be. I'll also give a quick shout out here that it would not surprise me if Ricky Council IV ends up being a guy inked to a long-term deal. He's playing awesome, was in that closing lineup in that Wizards win, having 19 and 10 in the game, and I'm a big fan of that from a roster construction standpoint, to give a guy a long-term deal, keep them under team control, and really maximize value that way. But the bottom line is there's still things to be done for the Sixers team. But the Kyle Lowry move is in the books. I am excited about that. That is a positive win now piece that has been added to this organization, and he's clearly excited to be here as well. So let me know what you guys think. What's your excitement level for Kyle Lowry? I've seen a pretty mixed bag of opinions over social media on how people feel about this, but I do want to hear from you. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Once again, make sure you are smashing that subscribe button to keep this Sixers Digest family growing. Drop a like on this video, and I'll be talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.